9:05. Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk KFYO. Statewide, we're gearing up for another session down in Austin, and joining us on the phones to talk about how this election went for Republicans here in the great state of Texas and how it may shape what the next legislative session will look like. The current Speaker of the Texas House, Dennis Bonnen. Speaker Bonnen, good morning. Welcome back. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Chad.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to visit with you. And I guess we'll just initially get your thoughts. I don't know if you were surprised by the results from the election in Texas, but the Democrats sure were, and it was a pretty good night for Texas Republicans.
It was a very good night for Texas Republicans. The Democrats were shocked. I was not terribly surprised because, with Governor Abbott and Speaker-elect Phelan and others, tremendous efforts had been made to bolster our Republican candidates across the state. Block walking, fundraising, supporting them in every way possible was going on. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the governor of Texas go into a Texas House member's district and block walk with them, but Governor Abbott did that for numerous incumbent Republicans trying to hold their seats. And the effort was made against the greatest opposition Texas has seen from the Democrats in decades. And we succeeded because the message worked. Republicans are about solving problems. We're about doing it with common sense and conservatism, and it prevailed. We showed them that in Senate Bill 2, we did a job on protecting them on property taxes skyrocketing. We showed them that we care about their children's education in House Bill 3 and about funding the finances of their schools. And so we took the successes from the last session, and we had great leadership driving that message and doing the whole of an election.
And obviously those successes will now lead into a new session, the upcoming session, which yesterday was the first day where members could file bills. You obviously you won't be a part of the next session, but give us your thoughts on obviously redistricting will be a major player unless that's moved by whoever's in the White House. But give us your thoughts as to what will be the big issues coming up in this next session.
Well, you're going to continue to have to deal with pandemic issues. You're going to continue to have discussions about education because one of the things that's a real challenge, we've got to educate our kids, period. You've got to do it safely. You've got to do it responsibly, but you have to educate them. And what we know is the best way to help educate a child is in a classroom. And so there's going to be discussions on how to do that. There's going to be discussions on distance learning and the technology and those issues around education, because if you, for some reason, don't have them in a classroom, you cannot afford to have any greater differential or drop-off on what kids have the access to that education and the quality of that education. So those will be major issues in the next session. But one of the things that's successful with good speakers like Speaker Phelan will be is the members will drive these issues. The speaker's job is to call the balls and strikes and make sure it's a fair process where everyone's allowed to represent their district and have their voices heard. It doesn't mean they get to win. It means they get to be heard. And so that will be driven, the issues and the policies will be driven by the members.
Give us some insight into Mr. Phelan, because
Sure.
up here, probably not a lot of people have heard his name very much, maybe except in the last week or so. So give us a little bit of insight into who he is.
He is a lifelong, rock-solid conservative Republican. From the time he was 16, he was knocking doors for Republican candidates in his communities. He's gone out and worked on the important issues for Republicans his whole life. He is a person who, when he tells you something, you can count on it. You can trust him. And one of the most important things in a legislative process for those within the process and for the constituents and our voters and the people of Texas is that you can trust your leaders. Dade Phelan's reputation is that he is a man who can be and has proven he is trustworthy. The reality of it is he will lead the House by setting the direction of civility and respect, but he's also known as someone who has not been afraid to take on tough issues. He will take on good conservative issues. He's one of the most pro-life members in the Texas House. I remember in his first session when he was fighting to increase the funds for alternatives to abortion. he led that effort on the House floor to get even more money into alternatives to abortion. Speaker Phelan is not afraid to stand up for his conservative principles and have an impact.
I want to ask you about some comments that Chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, Allen West, said. He came out and just blasted Mr. Phelan and said that he was a traitor to the Republicans. He said this: Texas will not allow the undermining of our Texas Republic. This is why the Republican Party of Texas is perplexed and will not support a potential Texas Speaker of the House who would seek affirmation from progressive socialist Democrats to attain that position. It's utterly absurd and idiotic, demonstrably idiotic, that any Republican would join with Democrats to lead our Republican majority. He said that the Republican Party will not support nor accept State Representative Dade Phelan as Speaker of the Texas House. Texas does not need a political or a Republican political traitor at a time when the two diverging philosophies of governance are lucid. Your thoughts?
I don't need the help raising the money, but we need to have a fund for Allen West to be bought a one-way bus ticket back to Florida. The problem is I don't think Florida will take him. Allen West is so off base and so out of line and so irresponsible, it is infuriating. Speaker Phelan won the supermajority of Republicans in the Republican caucus. But maybe Chairman West was too busy protesting in front of the governor's mansion like the weekend before the election, and he didn't notice. West should be considering his failures to do what his core job is, which is electing Republicans. I can't point to any decisions or efforts he made to help get Republicans elected. But I can point to what Speaker Phelan did. I can point to what Governor Abbott did. I can point to what a lot of people did. He sued over having the third week of early voting, which proved to be the difference in making sure two things didn't happen, or one thing didn't happen and one did. One, we didn't have the mail-in ballots, which you can see President Trump is suing and concerned in other states in the nation because of these highly questionable mail-in ballots. That didn't happen. And that extra week of early voting proved to possibly be the difference for many of our marginal Republican House seats, like a Morgan Meyer, like an Angie Chinbutton, and it was the difference of making sure they were reelected. But it is offensive to have a man who has not done his core job, which is helping get Republicans elected. He actually attacked and went after Republicans the entire November election cycle and did not attack Democrats. He left libertarians on the ballot that he could have challenged. He chose not to. There are one or two House seats that would have been won by Republicans had the chairman of the party done his job and challenged those libertarians on the ballot. He could have done it successfully, and we would have had two more Republicans possibly in the Texas House. So he needs to think about doing his job, and quite frankly, we really need to put him on that bus ticket back to Florida. Problem is I don't think Florida wants him. But it is unbelievable. Speaker Phelan followed the process. He won a majority, a supermajority of the Republicans, and the irony of it is that process is set up to ensure what Speaker Phelan's team avoided, which was a small number of Republicans go get the lion's share of the Democratic caucus and have them elected Speaker. The farthest thing from that is how Speaker Phelan was elected. He was elected with the Republicans. And we do then allow, after it's clear who's going to win, Democrats to say, I support you. What he is doing is embarrassing and one of the most counterproductive things you can do. But the reason is because, frankly, Allen West is a failed politician from Florida who we never should have allowed to come into Texas. We need to send him back.
Speaker, I want to get to a couple more things here, and one of them is this idea, and I know you came under a little bit of fire for this as well, and past speakers have, of having Democrats when you have Republicans who have won, Democrats who lead these committees. Why not just say Republicans lead the committees and not have Democrats lead any or chair any committees?
In the House and in the Texas Senate, there have always been Democrats who've been allowed to chair committees because the reality of it is You cannot on one hand say Washington is broken and how come they never ever get anything done and they never solve the problems of people in America, and then say I want that exact same process to be put into place in Texas. We have proven in Texas that conservative values and conservative ideals can successfully pass through this process, and it works more successfully by allowing the minority party some seat at the table. Democrat members voted for property tax reform, some of the most significant property tax reform in Senate Bill 2 this state has ever seen. How you do that is you give them a reason to be a part of the process. If you simply say, let's just fight and play politics and war the whole time, you don't pass monumental reforms like we did last session and we've done in the past. You have to have that belief that you will be treated respectfully and your ideas will be heard. It doesn't mean your ideas win. It means they will be heard. And that is the process in Texas, and it is proven time and time again to be far superior to the failures that we get from Washington, D.C.
Before I let you go, and we want to visit with you again before the session starts, definitely. But, Chairman West, and you brought up that he was protesting outside the governor's mansion before. He's been very vocal in his opposition, to some of the governor's actions regarding coronavirus. He's obviously very vocal against against Representative Phelan. Do you think that he's going to continue to be this vocal during the session, and do you believe that'll hurt the session moving forward?
No, it won't hurt the session because Allen West is irrelevant. He is a failed politician from Florida who is a petulant child trying to get his parents' attention. And Speaker Phelan and Governor Abbott and others are true Republican conservative leaders who are smarter than to listen to the noise of a child.
All right. Representative Dennis Bonnen, not holding back today. That's what we like about you. You never hold back. And we appreciate your honesty. And we'll visit with you again before the session, if that's all right with you.
Sounds good, Chad. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. That's Speaker of the Texas House, Dennis Bonnen, here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO.